Okay, friends, according to my computer, we are live. So let me see who we have out there. Let me check. I see Rosina from Germany. Good afternoon. My camera says that I'm live, so let me check to see who's out there. So first, I see Rosina. I see Sonia, Alicia from Texas. I have Lori from Indiana. Hi, everybody. Let's see, I have Carla from Arizona. Welcome, everybody. Who else do we have out there? We have Marianne from New Hampshire. We have Silpa from Kenya. We have Kendra from Montana. We've got people from all over today. We have Mary from Michigan. Let's see who else we have. Karen from New Hampshire. Shirley, and I'm sure we're going to have quite a few others join us. We normally have a couple hundred people join us for our lives. But anyway, welcome so much to month 2 of the Dresden Project. So now that it's 2 o'clock, we're ready to get started with our lesson. We're going to be here for about an hour, and I'm going to allow you to ask all the questions you want, and then I'm going to post the comments section of the video after we're done. I'm going to go through and read all of the questions and comments if I miss them during the live, and I will answer them in the comments. So you can go back to the video later and you can check to see if it's there. But hopefully you can hear me just fine. If not, turn up your computer, and we are ready to get started. Welcome. I'm super excited. For those of you who are new, my name's Yvonne, and this is the Jelly Roll Club. The Jelly Roll Club is a group of friends that got together a few years ago, and we decided we wanted to learn how to use all of our jelly rolls. So this is a great project for jelly rolls. So if you have a lot of random jelly roll scraps, this is a great time to get started using those. All right, so with no further ado, let me introduce you to month number 2 of the project, and let me talk about the project itself. Okay, so I'm going to switch camera views really quick. So first order of business, I'm going to go through the supplies that you're going to need today, and I'm going to move my mouse out of my way. So for today's lesson, you're going to need a handout that says Dresden Project Month 2 Black-Eyed Susan. This can be found on the website, which is www.jellyrollclub.com, and it has a leaf that you're going to use later, and it says right on the bottom, it says save the leaf template for later. You have a flower center that we're going to use today, and then for supplies, you need at least 2 jelly roll strips that are 2.5 inches wide. If you follow me on Facebook, you know that I said your jelly roll strips should be in the yellow-orange range, right? And so I have some examples of the strips that you could use for this project. So an orangey yellow like this one. These are all jelly roll strips I pulled from my stash. So any one of these would be beneficial for this. You also need a 5-inch center for this flower center. You need a 5-inch square. I picked this one. And then I'm going to be using the interfacing method for this particular flower. So I have a 5-inch piece of fusible interfacing. You can use non-fusible lightweight, and I'm going to use that to trace my flower center really quick and make my flower center. Okay? Does anybody have any questions so far? Welcome. Say hello to each other. We've got a lot of people in the chat, so I'm going to be monitoring the chat over here from one side. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the project itself. So this project is 9 months long as far as making the Dresdens themselves. And we're going to make a variety of Dresdens. We're going to make single Dresdens, which we did with lesson 1. We're going to make double Dresdens, which we will do later on in the series. And then we're going to do partial Dresdens, which is what we're going to do today. If you don't know what a Rudbeckia is or a Black-Eyed Susan, it is the state flag, I think, of Maryland. I'm pretty sure it's Maryland. But it's a flower that grows all over the Midwest in the United States, and it's a very hardy wildflower. It's a perennial, and it's kind of self-seeding, so it grows really nice. And so I thought this would be a great flower to add to the garden. My quilt is going to be what it is. It's 9 blocks that are 20 inches by 20 inches. So each block will have a different flower for a total of 9 flowers. But if you don't want your quilt to be 9 blocks and you want it to be bigger like a king or a queen, my quilt's going to be a little bit smaller. It's a lap. It's going to be 65 by 65. But if you want yours to fit a queen or a king, that section of the quilt in the middle is perfect for the center of a bed. And then you can make other blocks to drop off the sides. And we're going to talk about that in later segments because we're going to do 9 Dresdens. Then we're going to do leaves and stems. And finally, I'm going to show you how to put all of the blocks together for a finished quilt. Does that make sense? And if you have any questions, just let me know. If I go too fast, let me know. All right, so let's get started. The template we're going to use today is a 10-degree template. You should have had a copy of this. It is on the website. It looks like this when you print it out. And it has 3 different Dresden templates. It has a 10-degree, an 18-degree, and a 22-degree wedge. And when I say degrees, what I'm referring to is from here to here on the template without the seam allowance, because let me show you what, if you notice, this is the seam allowance that has been drawn on the template. If I take a protractor and I lay it down and I put that 0 right on this line before, without the seam allowance, and I lay it right there, from here to here is a 10, and that is a 10-degree wedge, which means in order to make a complete circle using this wedge, I would need a total of 36 wedges, right? 36 wedges to make a full circle. This is a very small template, and what I mean by small means that the blades are very narrow and they don't flare out, right? So the wider the degree, the more that your wedge flares out, and I'll give you some examples for comparison. So for example, I have a million Dresden templates, but let's just say that I wanted a Dresden template that was wider, right? So this one here, and I'll put this here so you can see that. So this particular template is an 18-degree template, and you can see the difference between the 18-degree and the 10-degree. If I lay this on top, you can see that this one flares out further out because it's wider. And so the wider the template, the less blades you need to make your complete circle. And I love Dresdens. I have a total of 12 Dresden templates. You don't need any templates for this project because I'm going to show you how to make them. So like this is a giant 30-degree blade. And so I have them in all kinds of sizes. But for this particular project today, you're only going to use the 10. Okay? If you do not have a 10-degree wedge, you're going to have to draw one. And so I'm going to give you the measurements in case you want to draw this today. So the first thing that you're going to need to draw is you're going to need to make sure that this is 6 inches long, because all of the blades that we're cutting today are 6 inches long. And so this little ruler I have right here is a 6-inch ruler. And so this one from top to bottom should measure 6 inches, right? And then at the narrowest point, you're just going to draw a line 6 inches from top to bottom like this. Then you're going to draw a line across this part of the wedge, and you're going to do 1 3/4. So if you do not have access to this template, you're just going to draw a 6-inch line. Then you do 1 3/4 across the top. Then you're going to measure down here at the bottom, centering it right here, and you're going to draw a line that is a little, let's see, this is a half, so this is not quite 3/4 of an inch, right? And then you're going to connect those lines down. If your template is off by just a hair, I don't want you to panic. It's okay. So that's the first thing that you're going to do. You're going to take this, and I'm going to cut my template because I'm going to use a regular ruler to cut my blades. So measure your template. Make sure that it is 6 inches tall if you printed it. And you're ready to get started. Okay, like I said, this template has the seam allowance, and you can see what that looks like. So there we go. All right, so let's get started. To make a Black-Eyed Susan, we're going to make a partial Dresden. And let me show you what she looks like when she's done. We're going to make a Dresden flower that looks like this because she's going to go in our garden. So we're going to make a Dresden that's a partial Dresden. Some people call this a quarter Dresden, but she's not quite a quarter because she's a little bit shy of that. But if you wanted to make a quilt that had partial Dresden blades, you could take and make her and lay her on a square, and you would have just a partial flower or a partial fan. And so this is the block that we're going for today, and she is just made with the Dresdens, and she represents the Black-Eyed Susan flower or the Rudbeckia, which when you see it from the side looks kind of like this little image you have here down at the bottom, right? So it's also looks a little bit like a cone, and so there is going to be what our finished block looks like. So let's get started. All right, I'm going to set this aside because I don't need this right now. And I'm going to show you how to build the Dresden part. Then I'm going to show you how to build the center. Okay, so first we're going to take this template here. And you're going to need to cut for your blades 6 inches from your strips. So you're going to take this, and I'm going to stack these. They don't have to be precise. So I'm going to need a total of 8 blades. I could pick 2 different colors and do 4 and 4, which is what I might do. So I have double layer right here, and I'm going to have a double layer right here, which will give me 4. So I'm going to lay these down here. I'm going to chop my selvages off because I do not want those selvages in my Dresden blade. So I'm going to chop those off. I'm going to save those for another day. And then I'm going to make sure that I have 6 inches worth of strip here. So I can use my mat. It's not as accurate, but for this particular block, it doesn't have to be exact because you're not doing precision piecing. Right? And so I'm just going to cut it right here. For those of you who are wondering about this little tiny mat, I got it at the Dollar Tree for $1. Love my little Dollar Tree mat. So I have 1, 2, 3, and 4 because I layered those. So now I have 4 of these. I also have 4 that I've already cut, so I'm going to lay those there. So I have a total of 8, right? And so I'm going to use these to make my Dresden today. Okay, so I have a total of 8 blades. 8 blades that are 10 degrees by 6 inches long. So how do you cut using a template and a regular ruler? So the easiest way to do that literally is to just lay your fabric down, and I usually press it whenever I'm cutting more than one layer. I like to give it a quick press. And the reason I do that is for 2 reasons. To help me cut a more accurate piece and to help my fabric stick together. So I'm just going to give these a quick press. And I'm going to cut 2 at a time. You can cut up to 3 at a time. That's not a problem. And I'm simply going to lay my Dresden here as far over as I can get it. I'm going to slide my ruler. I can tape this onto my Dresden if I wanted to, and then I'm going to give it a little slice. I'm going to rotate my mat. I'm going to carefully lift this. I'm going to slide that over so that it sticks. Like I said, you can always use a tiny bit of tape if you want to hold it in place if you don't have a 10-degree ruler. There you go. You can save these for something else because I'm going to be using all these little scraps later on for little partial flowers. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to get 7 and 8, and then I'll be ready for step 2. Like I said, I always give it a little press. All right. And then I will be ready for the next step in just a minute. All right, friends. So far, so good, right? Like I said, I just lay that right there, right on that edge. And I'm just careful not to slice that little template so that it doesn't get smaller and smaller and smaller every time I cut. And one of the things that I do is I leave the black edge so that I can see that I haven't like sliced it off accidentally. But if you do, it's not the end of the world. For this particular project, like I said, exact precision is not necessary. All right. So there we have it. We have all 8 of our blades for this particular project. And so I'm going to lay them out in the order that I'm going to put them together. So I'm just going to put these out here. I'm going to do a solid out here. And I'm going to layer it every other one, just to give it a little bit of visual interest. I don't necessarily always like using the same color. So we could put that here. We have this one, and then we have another. All right. So now I'm ready for step number 2. So for step number 2, I'm going to use the template. And I'm going to show you where you're going to mark these pieces. So you're going to sew these on both sides, but you're going to stop at the number 4-inch mark. And so I'm going to take a pencil, doesn't matter what, I use a regular school pencil, and you're going to mark these guys on the back side. And so I'm going to lay this template down, and I'm going to mark these at the 4-inch mark right here. Can you guys see that? I've taken my template and I marked at the 4-inch, and I put a little dot. If you want to, you can put a little dot all the way across, but I'm just going to mark at the 4-inch mark. So I'm going to take all of these and do the same thing. I'm going to flip them backwards on the back side. And I'm going to mark 4 inches. I'm going to mark 4 inches. Doesn't have to be exact, but it should be close to the 4-inch mark. Okay. Now these should probably be in the order in which you want to sew them. That's a good idea, right? To always keep things in order. So I'm going to put them back in the order that I had them. and I'm going to start picking up pairs. So I'm going to pick up pairs and I'm going to sew them. I'm going to put right sides together and I'm going to sew this 1/4 of an inch away from the edge all the way down, and I'm going to stop, right? So I'm going to match those up, and I'm going to pull my sewing machine over here so you can see what I'm talking about. Let me see if I can switch camera views as well. All right, let's see if you can see my, can you see my featherweight? Probably not a good angle, so let me just switch to the 2 camera view. All right, so on here, oh, you guys can see pretty good. I'm gonna come in from the side and I'm going to sew just 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to take 2 little stitches and I'm going to stop and drop my needle down. Okay? And then I'm going to come in, and I have a 1/4 inch seam guide on my machine, and I'm going to come in 1/4 of an inch, if you can see that, and I'm going to sew all the way down. I always use a leader and an ender to get my machine going. But so far, does anyone have any questions? So here's a question from Peggy. If I wanted to do a mini Dresden and I don't have the smaller template, could I use a regular one and just measure from the small end? Yes, it depends on how big of a circle you want. Probably if you don't have a template, my suggestion would be for you to draw one using a compass. And a compass is this right here. And in one of the later lessons, I'm going to show you how to make little mini ones using a compass if you don't have a template, like a little tiny template, okay? So there I have it, right? I have a Dresden that is sewn in from the side, and I went 1/4 of an inch all the way down, and I'm going to continue that all the way through. Somebody said, we need rain in Nebraska bad. Yeah, there's been a huge drought in the Midwest going on there for a while. A lot of our farmers and ranchers in the Midwest are really struggling. So I hope that that gets better. All right, friends. So I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to add the next one, but I'm going to go ahead and just add it all the way around. And it, in a normal Dresden, I sew pairs, and then those pairs get put together in order to maintain a consistent circle. But for this particular piece, I'm okay with that. So I'm going to come in at 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to sew, and then I'm going to come out the side. So I'm going to come down and out. Same with this one. I'm going to come down 1/4 of an inch away, and I'm going to come out this way. And I'm going to do that adding all of my pieces to this. And so you're just leaving a little segment up above that does not have a stitch on it. So in a normal Dresden, you would take and you would stitch from the top to the bottom. In this one, you are not going to. All right, I'm going to take another pair and I'm going to add it where I was. All right. And I'm going to keep going. This is going to be pretty fast here. It won't take you long at all to get these little Dresdens together. And like I said, precision is not important. Just make sure that you have lined up that edge and that you're sewing a nice 1/4 inch seam. It does not have to be a scant 1/4 inch seam. For those of you who are new to the Jelly Roll Club, welcome. We are happy that you're here. All of the patterns that we use for these projects are patterns that spring from suggestions from other club members. So if you have suggestions and you are part of the Facebook community, you should join us on our Facebook page because we post lots of pictures on there of member projects, and it's really a great source of inspiration if you've not been there. Linda said, how do you get your Dresden to lay flat when it's connected? I've made 2 and neither have been flat. Linda, if you will go back and watch lesson 1 that I did, I show you what happens because these are bias edges. You see what we have here? Sometimes if you kind of go astray a little bit, they can stretch and it can create a wobble in your Dresden. And so in order to get rid of that, you can take an extra little seam, and I show you how to flatten your Dresden in the previous lesson. So if you have not watched that video, you should go back and watch that because it will really change your Dresden making skills. I used to have that issue as well, and I had a really wonderful lady in 1996 who taught me how to have perfectly flat, wonderful Dresdens. Her name was Mary Charles. She used to have a local quilt shop, and so she was a great quilt teacher, and that's who taught me to have nice flat Dresdens. And look what happens there, right? Sometimes you get in a hurry and you break your thread. So I'm going to have to rethread my machine. So just give me a second. And I'm going to stop while I'm threading this machine, and I'm going to check the chat to see what questions are out there. So let's see what we have. Let's see, what questions do we have? Somebody said, I notice when I chain piece and cut my pieces apart, I have to do additional stitching on the end of my pieces. What can I do to avoid that additional step? In order to avoid having weak seams, especially when you chain stitch or you use a leader and ender, my suggestion is to shorten your stitch length by a considerable amount. A lot of people will say to do 2.5 on your sewing machine when piecing, but I prefer to do a 2.0 on a machine that is digital. On a machine like the one I'm using right here, which is a featherweight, I do 15 stitches to the inch. Sometimes I do a little, I even shorten it even more and do closer to like 18 stitches per inch, and that really, really helps me. All right, let's test and see if my sewing machine is threaded correctly, right? Yeah, that looks like she's back in action. Just tighten her up. All right. So I have done 3, and I have done 4, and now I'm going to put these 2 together. Okay. Let's see, make sure that's how I wanted them. Nope. They got out of order, right? So I wanted mine like this, and then I'm going to put this on the end. So I'm going to go ahead and attach these 2, and then I'm going to attach these 2. Now, if you've ever seen somebody put together curved petals on a Dresden, they normally curve them before they get started. But in this case, we're going to do some fussy work because we want it to look like a real black-eyed Susan, like a Rudbeckia, right? And so we're going to do a little bit of fussy sewing. And I must be going a little too fast. Do you guys ever get a bobbin that you wind and you're like, I don't know that that bobbin wound correctly? That's what I'm experiencing today, so I may switch my bobbin. If you ever have that happen, friends, you see how my bobbin is tangling? That's a bobbin that's not wound correctly and it's causing me issues. You have to be careful when you have a vintage machine. If you get aftermarket parts, this is not an original bobbin. Sometimes they don't work out. This one has like a lip on it, so it's causing my machine problems today. Not a problem. I have one of the originals, and so I will put that in there. And hopefully that will fix my problem. Yeah, real black-eyed Susans need a lot of rain. Like I said, it's the state flower of Maryland, and they do like a nice wet spring, but not too wet. They like the sunshine. Rudbeckias are one of my favorite flowers. Anybody else grow black-eyed Susan in their garden? All right. Fun times here, right? Yep, I lick my fingers to get that threaded. If you ever notice that your thread is breaking and you've rethreaded your machine like I did, always switch out the bobbin. Sometimes you can switch out the needle. Anything like that can cause problems. Sometimes I just go back and rethread just like I did. And then pull your bobbin thread up and sew on a little piece of waste and test your tension. And I always test it out on a little piece of scrap fabric. All right, there we go. Sounds much better. Sounds much better, looks much better. It's amazing what a machine will do when it doesn't like the bobbin you're using, right? All right. So I am going through here and I'm going to make it all the way down to where I drew that little polka dot, and I'm going to stop and I'm going to sew off that edge, and then I'm going to add my last one. If you are doing chain piecing like I do, always leave like a little tail, because that'll keep that seam from opening up on you. Okay, so now you have this thing that looks like this, right? So it's sewn most of the way down, stopping at the same interval for each of these. And try not to pull it too much and stretch it, because that is a bias edge that you're sewing with, so that can happen. All right. If you are doing an applique project, then you should not starch your fabric, because in applique you're counting on those bias edges and those smooth edges. So I try not to starch my fabric if I'm doing applique. I just wash everything, and then if I'm doing precision piecing, then I will use starch when I'm pressing and cutting. But if I'm using my fabric for applique, then I do not starch it. I simply press it with a lot of steam and pre-shrink it. I'll wash it and pre-shrink it so that my applique lays smooth and soft, and I get really nice edges on my applique. All right, last but not least, we have one more. Oops, did I not mark that one? I thought I did, but sometimes you skip one. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to mark the 4-inch mark. All right, and so there's my last one. And so now I'm done with this step 1. All right, you should now have something that looks like a weird little fan, right? Let me move my sewing machine aside for a second. And so let me pull this off of here and show you what I've got. So now I have something that looks like this, right? A weird little fan with some edges that look like this, right? All the way down. And if it looks like that, then it's perfect. You're like, what a mess. What is that woman doing? You're going to see in a minute. So then the next thing that we're going to do to all of this is we're going to let these seams lay flat. So I'm going to come here with my finger and I'm going to press these so that they're flat. You can press them open if you want. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to press mine to one side because that's what I prefer. So I'm going to make sure that these are not snipped together here. And I'm just going to press them all to one side. So that's what I'm going to do with mine for now. Just kind of finger press it as I go. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take something. It could be, this is a cap to a vitamin container. But you're going to need something that's about 2 inches. So I have a little cardboard template that's about 2 inches because that's about how wide that is. And I'm going to mark this out here and make myself a little piece of template plastic that has that curve on it. So if you take your 2-inch circle and you just kind of visualize that curve and you subtract the seam allowances, you end up with something that looks like this. And you can use your template for this because it has a middle line. So if you notice, your template has a line down the center. So you can take your template and literally draw, connect that down to the seam allowance, and then come down, just like this. And if you take that template and you draw and connect that line like that. So you just want something that curves like this. Like I said, you can take a cap to a medicine container like this and just draw yourself a line, but you're going to want that to curve, right? And then from that curve, you're going to take the seam allowance and you're going to take it off. So you're going to end up with a shape that looks like this. So you're just going to have something that looks kind of like this. I'm chopping my template. And then I've cut my little thing. So now I have this little guy, right? So it looks like a little petal of a flower. And that's what I want. I took a little bit of template plastic. You can take cardboard, it doesn't matter. And you're going to lay that on there. And you're just going to trim to size. So I took a little bit of template plastic. You can use cardboard for this, it doesn't matter. And I'm making myself a little blade, a little miniature blade with a curve on it. You just clean it up. Doesn't have to be perfect, and now it looks like this, right? So about a 2-inch circle is what you're looking at. This is, like I said, a cap to a medicine. For my Dresden drawer, I keep all kinds of circles. And now you're ready for the next step. All right, for the next step, I'm going to take this here, right, which does not have seam allowances now, and I'm going to lay this right here so that I can shape my leaves, right? And so the reason I wanted to sew those first is because I want to make sure that I'm getting these leaves the way I want. And I'm going to press with a little bit of starch this particular thing. So I'm going to take a little bit of starch. You can do this with freezer paper, you can do this with starch, but I'm just going to take a little bit of starch and an old paintbrush. And I'm going to pin this out of my way so that I could shape the blades to look like a black-eyed Susan, because I want them to look like a black-eyed Susan. So I'm just going to take and I'm going to brush that starch all over that template plastic. And you can just drown it if you want. So I'm going to brush, brush, brush all along until that's kind of wet. I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold it with my fingers like this so I can shape the end of that petal that's going to go on there. And so I'm going to center that, and I want to make sure that that's good and centered. Right? I'm going to take my ironing mat, which I have beside me, and I'm going to use my little mini iron, my little small iron, right? And I'm going to press that down. So I'm getting it as smooth as I can, and I'm going to use some starch to press that baby. So I made myself a little pressing template. If you want to use cardboard, that's fine. If you want to use freezer paper, that's fine. But I'm just making the shape of my petals that I want. On the end, I'm going to come in and I'm going to fold that seam allowance down because this will get appliqued on the background when we're done with it. And so there's the first one. If I want, I could actually make these petals different heights if I wanted to give it a little bit more interest. So if I wanted to make this a little bit smaller, I could actually chop these ends if I wanted to make that a deeper curve. But I'm just going to take and I'm going to give my little petals some shape. And I want a little bit of separation in between those petals, so I'm going to come in and maybe fold it even smaller with my finger and bring it in and just give it that shape I want while it's still wet. And if you don't like the shape that it has, guess what you can do? You can take a little bit of water and you can spritz some water, and then you can change the shape of those petals. You need a total of 8 petals. All right, so there I have it, right? I have 1 petal. And so I'm going to do that to all of my petals. I'm going to take and I'm going to fold that back a little bit. And I'm going to shape all of these petals. So I'm going to fold these down, and I'm only going to pull them up one at a time when I'm ready to work on them. And so I want this partial Dresden. It's not quite a 1/4 because a 1/4 would be 9. So we're going to do 8 blades of a 10 degree. And so this is a partial. So there I have it. And I'm going to take the next one. I'm going to take a little bit of starch. Put it in the lid. Just regular, faultless, premium starch. And I'm going to shape it while it's wet. So I'm going to bring this in like this and finger crease it right there. And I'm just going to drown it with some starch right across the top and the bottom. And I'm going to bring this in like this. And I'm going to push it with my fingers to give it the shape I want. And hold it like that. And then I'm going to bring my little iron and I'm going to press it. If you have one of those little Clover mini irons, this is a great time to pull it out. It helps with detail work. And so what we're doing is we're forming an applique flower that we're going to applique onto our background later. If it's lifting, you just spritz it with a little bit more starch. You press it down. And you give it an iron. Like I said, I use heat-resistant Mylar because you can press it and it won't melt. And it's easy to cut. All right. If you have a lot of excess fabric, like some of these, you can come in with your little applique scissors and you can clean them up a little bit like this if you want to get rid of some of that bulk. You can even come in and you can cut them with pinking shears if you want to cut some of that excess. Just chop it off with some pinking shears to keep it from raveling. But it doesn't really matter. If you just don't want the bulk, you can come in and get rid of it. But not too much. right? And then you give those little petals a little press. So then your petals are nice and smooth. But make sure that this right here, this junction where the petals are, is nice and pressed. And look at that. So now I'm getting the shape of my Dresden, right? It's connected from here down, but it's also looking like a flower. And I'm going to do that all the way across my Dresden. Move these out of the way. Lay the template down that I created, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to make sure that it's down here. Cut a little string. And that I have at least 1/4 of an inch from this end down here. You just want at least 1/4 of an inch that you can fold over. And again, you can spray it like this if you want, or you can brush it on. Either way, it does not have to be super fussy. But definitely you're going to need all of your fingers. To get that edge nice and smooth, you just pull with your fingers really tight, and then you push with your iron against the cardboard or the template. If you want to use freezer paper, you can cut a total of 8 little shapes that look like this with freezer paper, and you could do the same thing. So depending on what's available. All right. Pull that out. I'm going to come back on this side and I'm going to give it a press. And slowly but surely, won't take us very long, I'm creating a Black-Eyed Susan using my Dresden blades. Oops. Dropped my iron, friends. All right. So far, pretty straightforward, yes? Does anybody have any questions? I'm really excited about this project. I think this project is going to be delightful. So whether you choose to do the big 60 by 60 centerpiece, or you do it in blocks, or you do one Dresden, or you use these to embellish a quilt, I think that you're going to like these blocks. They're going to turn out really, really beautiful. Normally, when you do a sew-along, there's a single quilt that everybody makes. But in this case, you're going to be making whatever you want to make. So a lot of times the projects that I work on with the Jelly Roll Club are what are called inspiration pieces, which means I teach you a skill and give you some tools, and then you use that as inspiration to create whatever you want to create. So your project does not have to look like mine. Your project will look however you want your project to be. So this is for skill building and to allow your creativity to shine. So whatever you want to do with this project, please feel free. You can use a single flower on a pillow. You can use these for table runners. You can do whatever you want to do with these flowers. There we go. So now there's the 4th petal, and so on and so forth. So how many Dresden newbies do we have out there? What can you clean the iron with? This sounds kind of crazy, but I clean my iron with a little bit of olive oil. So anytime that you get glue or starch buildup on your iron, I take a cotton ball with a little bit of olive oil or even sewing machine oil, and when the iron is cold, I rub that with the cotton ball. You can also, I've had people say you can use a dryer sheet when the iron is hot, but the dryer sheet can melt. So I prefer to literally take just a cotton ball with olive oil, rub the bottom of my iron. It gets rid of all the gunk and the starch and the buildup. And then take a small wet wipe, you know, or a cloth with just plain soap and water when the iron is not hot. And then I just clean the bottom of my iron. And that's how I get rid of all that residue. You can also use something called Goo Gone, and that works as well. Okay. Getting there. I'm going to have to move this. My iron is getting caught on something, and it keeps wanting to flip off my table. There we go. You guys ever do that? Put your iron in a precarious place and then it falls. Not fun times when it falls on carpet, right? I keep my iron most of the time on one of these heat-proof mats. It looks like this. It's like a trivet and it keeps it from sliding as well on the table. All right, so then there's 8. If you want to open some of these seams because it lays better, you can, but I try to avoid open seams whenever possible because open seams are weak seams. For those of you who've been quilting, I've been quilting for a total of over 35 years. I've been sewing for almost 40. Open seams are my nemesis. I don't like them at all. So you're a Dresden newbie, Diane. So tell us what questions you have. Dresdens are fun, fun, fun. Look at that. Like I said, if you want to make some of these shorter, you can. But this is almost done. The original Dresden is believed to have originated in Germany. There was a company that made dishes called the Dresden Dish Company. They were beautiful, blue and white. I've been looking up Dresden plates and I have fallen completely in love. But the mark on the bottom of the plate is what the original Dresden block was supposed to have been the inspiration for that block. Now, there's some historians that say that it was earlier than that, earlier than the 1900s, and it might have been, but during World War I and World War II, a lot of the records in England were damaged, as were in other places in Europe, and so they're not quite sure as to the original reason for the Dresden marking on the bottom of those plates. But I like to find out where things come from. And so Dresden plates, the original marking on dishes is from Germany. So my friend Rosina knows that, right? All right, look at this. We're getting there. It's laying flat. These pieces need to dry because the starch is wet, right? And so there we have it. Almost done, friends. Okay, so now that I'm almost done with the blades, let me talk about the center, right? A Black-Eyed Susan has a center that's a little bit odd-shaped. It looks a little bit like a cone, but not quite. I'll make this tiny bit smaller because I'm struggling, so make that a little bit smaller. There we go. So the center of a Rudbeckia or a Black-Eyed Susan is kind of oblong and pointy, almost like a cone a little bit, depending on the variety. In others, it's a little bit more flat. If you look up close, they have these oddly shaped leaves that are kind of oblong. So I provided you with a leaf that we're going to use later with this particular little flower. So don't forget to save that somewhere. That's your template. It looks like this, the rudbeckia leaf. And then this is the flower center that we're going to do next. So that's what's up next, okay? These flowers would be great if you wanted to put them in a table runner and do a brown background and do a bunch of beautiful yellow rudbeckias with some chartreuse green leaves. I think they would look wonderful. So if you wanted to make a fun, for a friend who lives in Maryland, this would be a fun table runner. So now I'm going to take the last one here on the end, just like we did at the beginning, and I'm going to fold that down and I'm going to press it. Give it a little starch along that edge to keep it from fraying and to keep it where it's supposed to be. And I'm going to iron this bottom here. And then I'm going to finish this one up, and I am almost done. And I'm going to make it a tiny bit shorter than the other one, so I'm going to push that all the way down because I want this to be a little bit shorter than the one beside it. And then I'm going to hold it with my finger. If you guys can see that, just like that. Come in and give it a press before I release. If you don't want to get your hands too close to that like I have, you can always use something like this. You can use a stiletto. You can use a metal bodkin. This is just a regular bodkin. And you can use that to hold these down like this and then bring your iron over and kind of slide it out. But there's Appliquick tools. There's all kinds of little expensive tools, but you don't have to spend money. One of my goals is to also teach you to save money so that you can spend it all on fabric, because that's what I like to do. I save my money on tools so that I can spend it all on fabric because I'm a fabric addict. All right. So let's flip it over and let's make sure that we don't have any creases. See, that one has a little crease. So I'm just going to spray that with a little bit of starch and fix that with my fingers. I'm going to roll that back, push it with my fingers, and then press it so that it has no creases on the front. And now I'm going to make it as flat as I can. I'm going to take and just flat, flat, flat. I want that to be as flat as possible. As long as your seams are pretty straight, you're going to get some blocks that are pretty flat. There we go. And there is my black-eyed Susan that will sit like this. I don't know if you can see that. Okay, now comes the center. To make the center, the method I'm going to show you is called the interfacing smooth method. So this is interfacing right here, and it has a bumpy side that has a little bit of glue, and it has a smooth side, right? And this is just lightweight fusible interfacing, but you could use any kind of lightweight interfacing whether it has glue or not, and the process is still the same. You're going to lay it on top of here. You don't need a light box, and you're just going to trace that flower center. And that is my sewing line, right? I'm going to lay this pretty side up. This is a 5-inch square. And I'm going to take this, and this has smooth on this side, bumpy on this side. I'm going to lay the bumpy side down. And now I'm going to sew all the way around, and I'm not going to leave an opening, right? So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to bring this machine over, and I'm going to give her a quick stitch all the way around. Probably be a good time to clean my sewing machine. If your sewing machine ever has tension issues or whatever, clean it really well. Give her a good oil. Switch that needle, rethread, and wind a fresh bobbin. And you'd be amazed how many Sewing machine problems can be avoided with just a little bit of care. Okay. A nice tight stitch all the way around, right on top of that green line that I drew there. I drew it kind of big and thick so you can see it. I used a washable marker, like the kind that children use. I don't like to use anything to mark that's not washable, and you have to be careful when using markers or marking tools around your quilts, because you can really, really mess up your quilts with some marking tools. Anna, we drew the template for the petals. So if you go back and you re-watch the video, you can see how I drew it. And this will be available for a replay on YouTube as soon as we're done. Okay, so there I have it. I have stitched all the way around. I'm going to take, and I'm going to use pinking shears, and I'm going to come in as close as I can and leave like 1/8 of an inch all the way around. So there it is, super quick, right? And I'm going to pinch this apart, just like this. And I'm going to put a snip in there. And I'm going to cut a slit that's about 2 inches long. So maybe about 1 inch that way and 1 inch that way. Not too big. Then I'm going to take, you can take your little paintbrush that I was using here earlier and push it through, or you can just pinch in there and pull it through like this. You're going to carefully roll that without stretching or tearing that, because interfacing can tear on you, but that's okay. And then I just stick my finger in there all the way around. You can use the paintbrush to push it around. Careful not to tear it. You don't want to get too carried away. And now my center is ready. I'm going to take, and I can decide which way this Black-Eyed Susan's going to go. I could put the pointy part up like this, right? And I could do it like this, or I could take and do it this way, or I could take and do it that way. You decide how you want your center to go. I'm going to put my center this way on my Rudbeckia. And so mine is going to go like this, because I want to assemble this and have it ready to applique onto my background. I'm going to take a little bit of parchment paper, like the kind that you use to line a baking sheet. And I'm going to take, and I'm going to press this down onto the background. So this is like this, right? I've got my edges folded under. I've got it all pressed. If I want to remove some of that bulk, the excess fabric, I can, but it doesn't have to go down. If you starch it really well and you press it down, you don't need to remove the bulk. It stays pretty flat. If you notice, this is very, very flat. I'm going to take this and I'm going to push it down, and I'm going to take it about where that slit is, just like that, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press it down to anchor that to my Black-Eyed Susan. And I'm only pressing this bottom half. If you notice, I'm not pressing that top half. So I'm only doing this bottom half so that I'm attaching it to the petals themselves. All right. I'm gonna let it cool. and this still has glue. And so when I get ready to applique this Rudbeckia, she will be ready to go, and I could press her onto my background, and I can do two things with her at this point. I could do a stitch all the way around like this, top stitch with my sewing machine, and come back here. Or if you wanted to, you can hand stitch her down onto a background. But she is ready to go. Say hello to the Black-Eyed Susan, the state flower of Maryland. I'm so happy that you're here. Like I said, she is going to go on a 20 by 20 inch background for me. And I'm going to create stems and leaves at the end of the series using this template, and my block is going to look like this. So I'm going to add a couple of these flowers onto there. This is the Black-Eyed Susan block, and so you are ready now for month number 2. And for those of you who are not aware, you can go to the website, and the website tells you what we're going to do in what order. So the next flower we're going to be doing is the California Poppy, and that is June the 5th. And so you will need some oranges for the California Poppy. And the California Poppy has wide blades. So bring 2, maybe 3 full Jelly Roll strips in oranges for the California Poppy. And that's on June the 5th. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask me? Let me see what's in the chat. So should you make 3 of those? I'm going to make 2 for my block. My block is going to be 20 by 20, and I'm going to make 2 of these. I'm not going to make 3 because 3 would be too many. So I'm going to make 2 of this size, and I'm going to show you how to make a miniature later. But that's what I'm going to do for mine. If you want to make 3, you can. It's up to you. You can, and let me show you what's behind me. If you did not want to do the entire, let me move that can. If you did not want to do the entire quilt out of individual blocks, you could make a whole cloth quilt and then put your Dresdens vertically and then put stems that way and make it a big giant art quilt. So you can either make 20 by 20 inch blocks, or you can make a 60 by 60 whole cloth background and then attach your blocks to that. So it's up to you what you want to do with your blocks. I'm going to make 2. Thank you for joining me for the Black-Eyed Susan. I'm making 2 of mine. So that's what I have. I have 2 of these guys. Can you see that? I've got 2 of these ladies, and I made them a little bit different. So I'm going to be adding these to my block. At any rate, thank you for coming. Let me know if you have any questions. I will be happy to answer whatever questions you have in the comments. If you have not subscribed to the channel, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. This is the Jelly Roll Club, and we are here to provide you with full-length quilting lessons to help unlock your creativity, and so that's what we do. All of the templates are on the website. Let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget to like our Facebook page if you have Facebook, and have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. Thank you, friends. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Bye-bye. Have a great week. I'll see you guys soon.